Welcome to Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation of history's most interesting people. I'm your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these fascinating lives. Now, let's meet our guest. Today, we are joined by one of the most prolific and beloved storytellers to ever pick up a pen. For those who may somehow not know who you are you?
Hi, Calvin. I am Charles Dickens, a man who spent his life chasing the ghosts of London and setting them down on paper for all to see. I suppose some might call me a novelist or a social reformer, but at my heart, I've always just been a storyteller.
It is an absolute honour, Charles. We have so much to get into. Let's start at the very beginning. When and where were you born?
I entered this world on February 7th, 1812. The location was a place called Landport in Portsmouth, England. It was a busy naval town, quite the lively start for a boy.
And what was your given name at birth?
My full name was Charles John Huffam Dickens. Quite a mouthful, isn't it?
Definitely sounds prestigious. Is there a story behind your birth name?
Indeed. The Huffam was in honor of Christopher Huffam, who was a rigger in the Navy and my godfather. My father worked as a clerk in the Navy pay office, so the seafaring world was very much woven into our family fabric from the start.
That's fascinating. What was your hometown like growing up?
Portsmouth was exciting, but it's Chatham that holds the key to my happiest memories. I moved there when I was about 5. It was a bustling dockyard town full of sailors, soldiers, and the most wonderful variety of people. I spent my days exploring the streets and watching the ships. It felt like the center of the universe to a young boy.
Sounds like a dream. What was your family life like?
It was a bit of a roller coaster, Calvin. My parents, John and Elizabeth, were wonderful social people who loved a good party. In fact, my mother was at a ball the very night I was born. But my father, well, he had a bit of a difficult time with the ledgers. He spent money faster than he could earn it, which led to a lot of moves and, eventually, some very dark times.
I can imagine. What kind of kid were you?
I was a very small, somewhat sickly child. I couldn't join in the rough and tumble games of the other boys, so I became a keen observer. I spent most of my time tucked away with books, Defoe, Fielding, Smollett, or putting on little plays. I suppose I was a bit of a dreamer.
Those dreams clearly paid off. What were your biggest fears growing up?
My greatest fear was being forgotten, or worse, becoming common. I had a deep, burning desire to be a gentleman. The thought of falling into the abyss of poverty, which I saw all around me in London, terrified me more than any ghost story.
And what did you dream of becoming as a child?
Oh, I wanted to be a man of letters, or perhaps a great actor. I used to stand on tables and sing songs or recite poetry for my father's friends. I craved the stage and the spotlight, even back then.
You certainly found your spotlight. What were some of your favourite activities in school?
I loved writing small tales for my schoolmates at Wellington House Academy. We even put on little theatrical productions. I was also quite fond of the school newspaper we created. Anything that allowed me to spin a yarn was where I was happiest.
Spoken like a true writer. What was your first job?
My first real taste of the working world was quite bitter. At just 12 years old, I was sent to Warren's blacking warehouse. My job was to tie string around pots of shoe polish and paste labels on them. It was a miserable, rat-infested place by the river.
That sounds incredibly tough for a 12-year-old. Was there a moment where you realised you were different from everyone else?
It was during that time at the blacking factory. I felt a deep sense of humiliation and abandonment while my father was in debtor's prison. I realized then that I had a fire in me, a drive to escape that life, and to tell the stories of those who were trapped in it. I felt I had a different purpose than just labeling pots.
What's a decision that changed everything for you but felt small at the time?
Mastering Gurney's system of shorthand. It was a tedious, difficult task, like learning a new language, but it allowed me to become a parliamentary reporter. That was the bridge from being a law clerk to becoming a professional writer.
What was your biggest break?
Without a doubt, it was the Pickwick Papers. It started as a series of captions for sporting sketches, But I took over the story and it became a sensation. Suddenly, Boz, that was my pen name, was on everyone's lips.
What were your biggest struggles before success?
The lack of a consistent education and the crushing weight of my family's debts. I had to grow up far too fast. There were days when I walked the streets of London, hungry and alone, wondering if I would ever amount to anything.
Did you ever consider quitting?
Never. If anything, the hardships made me more determined. I had a restless, energetic spirit, as I used to say. Quitting simply wasn't in my vocabulary.
Were there any specific daily habits or routines that you feel are essential to your success?
I was a creature of intense habit. I would write from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m. every single day in absolute silence. Then I would go for a walk, 10, 15, even 20 miles through the streets of London or the countryside. Those walks were where I found my characters and worked out my plots.
What job would you have had if fame never happened?
I likely would have been an actor or a stage manager. I never lost my love for the theater. Even after I was a famous author, I spent an enormous amount of time organizing and performing in amateur theatricals.
What was your life like before fame?
It was a whirlwind of activity. I was a young man in a hurry, working as a reporter, falling in love for the first time with a girl named Maria Beadnell, which ended in quite a heartbreak, and trying to make my mark on the world.
How did relationships change after success?
It was complicated. Success brings many friends, but it also creates distance. My marriage to Catherine became quite strained over the years. I found it difficult to balance the demands of my public life with the needs of my domestic one.
Did fame bring happiness?
It brought satisfaction and the ability to help others, which gave me great joy. But it also brought a relentless pressure to keep producing, to keep being the great Dickens. It was a heavy mantle to wear at times.
What was the downside of becoming famous?
The loss of privacy. I once had to burn 20 years worth of personal letters in a giant bonfire at my home, Gads Hill Place, just to keep them out of the hands of the public. I wanted my life to be known through my work, not my private correspondence.
What misconceptions did people have about you?
Many thought I was as jolly and carefree as my early characters, like Mr. Pickwick. In reality, I could be quite moody, exacting, and possessed by a dark sort of energy. I took my work and my social causes very seriously.
What was your darkest moment?
The time I spent at the blacking warehouse as a child was the darkest hour of my life. I kept it a secret from almost everyone, including my wife and children, for nearly my entire life. The shame of it never truly left me.
What past regrets did you carry that you spoke about?
I regretted the way my marriage ended and the pain it caused. I also often looked back at my youth and wished I had been able to stay in school longer. I always felt I was playing catch-up with my education.
What's something people misunderstood about your life?
People often didn't realize how much of my fiction was based on my own reality. When I wrote about orphans or the poor, I wasn't just imagining things. I was drawing from the very real scars on my own heart.
Tell me about a time when everything went wrong and how did you handle it?
In 1865, I was in a terrible railway accident at Staplehurst. My carriage was hanging off a broken bridge. I had to climb out and help the injured and dying. It was horrific. I handled it by doing what I always did. I went to work. I stayed to help as many as I could, even though the experience haunted me for years.
That is incredibly brave. Did fame and fortune change your life?
It allowed me to buy Gads Hill Place, the very house my father had pointed out to me when I was 9 years old. It gave me a voice to fight for the poor and to demand better schools and housing. In that way, it changed everything.
Who had the biggest influence on your life?
My father, for better and for worse. He inspired some of my most famous characters, like Mr. Micawber, and his struggles gave me the drive to succeed. Also, my friend and biographer John Forster, who was my sounding board for decades.
What was life like in your final years?
Busy, as always. I was doing public readings of my work, which I loved, but which were also incredibly exhausting. I traveled to America for a second tour, which really took a toll on my health. I was determined to work until the very end.
What were you working on in your career before you passed away?
I was in the middle of writing a mystery novel called The Mystery of Edwin Drood. I had only finished about half of it when my time ran out. I suppose it will remain a mystery forever.
When and where and how did you pass away, and how old were you?
I passed away on June 9th, 1870 at my home, Gads Hill Place, after suffering a stroke. I was 58 years old.
What's a random fact about you most people have never heard?
I was a firm believer in mesmerism, a form of animal magnetism or hypnosis. I even used it to try and help my friend John Leach when he was injured. I found the power of the mind absolutely fascinating.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you?
Oh, there were all sorts of whispers about my private life, especially after I separated from Catherine. Some people even suggested I was having an affair with my sister-in-law, Georgina. It was all quite monstrous and false, of course.
What was your most unique habit?
I was obsessed with rearranging the furniture in whatever room I was staying in. I couldn't write or sleep unless everything was exactly in its proper place. I was quite the perfectionist.
What was your favorite food?
I loved a good roast beef and Yorkshire pudding, followed by a nice toasted cheese. And of course, a bowl of punch. I even wrote out my own special recipes for it.
Did you have a favorite restaurant?
I was quite fond of the Cheshire Cheese in London. It had just the right atmosphere for a storyteller.
What was your favorite book?
I always had a soft spot for David Copperfield. I used to say that of all my, quote, literary children, I loved David the most. It held so much of my own life within its pages.
Did you have any known rivalries?
William Makepeace Thackeray and I had a bit of a complicated relationship. We were friends, then had a major falling out over a disagreement at a club, the Garrick Club affair, and didn't speak for years. Thankfully, we reconciled shortly before he passed.
Tell us a story nobody talks about.
Once, when I was a reporter, I had to transcribe a speech while sitting in a carriage that was racing through a rainstorm. I was holding a candle in one hand and writing with the other, trying to keep the paper dry. It was pure chaos, but I got the story.
What's your funniest behind-the-scenes moment?
During one of our amateur plays, the scenery fell down right in the middle of a dramatic scene. We just had to keep going as if nothing had happened, while the audience roared with laughter.
Did you ever prank someone?
I loved a good joke. I once filled a friend's bookshelf with fake books that had ridiculous titles I made up, like The Art of Cutting the Teeth or Noah's Architecture. I spent hours laughing at his confused expression.
What was the most outlandish purchase you made?
I suppose buying Gads Hill Place was my most outlandish dream come true. To a boy who had worked in a blacking factory, owning a grand estate like that felt like buying the moon.
What advice would you give people chasing success?
Never to put one hand to anything on which I could throw my whole self. Whatever you do it with your entire heart and soul. And remember, no one is useless in this world who lightens the burdens of another.
Charles, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before we sign off?
Only that it has been a true delight to revisit the world for a brief moment. To the listeners, I say, keep your hearts open and your imaginations wild. Thank you so much for having me, Calvin. It's been a capital time.
Thank you, Charles. What an incredible journey through the life of a legend. From the docks of Chatham to the dark streets of London, and eventually to the halls of literary history, Charles Dickens showed us that even the toughest beginnings can lead to a legacy that lasts forever. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.